Back to Pride and Prejudice. Chapter 49. Here we come. Oh gosh, it's ramping up the suspense of like, where is Lydia? Where is Wickham? Wickham is actually just, we keep finding out that Wickham is a terrible, terrible man. And Darcy's actually really kind and nice. Although we haven't heard from Darcy in a while, but I want to hear back from Darcy. Okay. And you know, Mr. We got a letter from Mr. Collins saying like I'm certain you would hope that your child would actually be dead instead of going through this, which really hit me hard, you guys. I don't know why. That was really crazy to hear. Again, a second time around. All right, let's dive in. Dividity dive right back in. 2 days after Mr. Bennet's return, as Jane and Elizabeth were walking together in the shrubbery behind the house. I just imagine them walking, like, in the shrubbery. That's funny. They saw the housekeeper coming towards them and concluded that she came to call them to their mother. Went forward to meet her, but instead of the expected summons, when they approached her, she said that Miss Bennet, whichever Miss Bennet, I beg your pardon, madam. Madam, I know I did this before, for interrupting you, but I was in hopes that you might have got some good news from town. So I took the liberty of coming to ask. What do you mean, Hill? We've had nothing from town. Dear madam, cried Mrs. Hill in great astonishment, don't you know that there's an express come from Mr. Gardiner? He has been here this half hour, and Master has had a letter. There's express come from Mr. Gardiner. He's been here. And Master had a letter. Away ran the girls, too eager to get in to have time for speech. Too eager to get in to have time for speech. They ran through the vestibule, into the breakfast room, from thence to the library. Their father was in neither, and they were on the point of seeking him upstairs with their mother, when they were met by the butler, who said, If you're looking for my master, ma'am, he is walking towards the little copse. I even have it underlined, and I have looked it up before, and now I'm going to write it down. Copse. C-O-P-S-E. I've already looked it up, and I've already forgot. Copse. Copse?
Copse.
Copse. A small group of trees. It's the trees and the carriages that, like, all these words I don't know about, like specific words about trees and carriages. Copse. Coppice wood. Coppice wood? Okay, sorry. Feel like he's walking toward the copse. Okay. Upon this information, they instantly passed through the hall once more and ran across the lawn after their father, who was deliberately pursuing his way towards a small wood on one side of the paddock. Jane, who was not so light nor so much in the habit of running as Elizabeth, soon lagged behind, while her sister, panting for breath, came up with him and eagerly cried out, Oh, Papa, what news, what news? Have you heard from my uncle? Yes, I have a letter from him by express. Well, and what news does it bring, good or bad? What is there of good to be expected? Said he, taking the letter from his pocket. But perhaps you would like to read it. Elizabeth impatiently caught it from his hand. Jane now came up, just now. Wow. Read it aloud, said their father, for I hardly know myself what it is about. Okay. Gracechurch Street, Monday, August 2nd. My dear brother, at last I am able to send you some tidings of my niece, and as such, upon the whole, I hope it will give you satisfaction. Soon after you left me on Saturday, I was fortunate enough to find out in what part of London they were. The particulars I reserve till we meet. It is enough to know they are discovered. I have seen them both. Then it is as I always hoped, cried Jane. They are married. Elizabeth read on. I have seen them both. They are not married, nor can I find was any intention of being. So. But if you are willing to perform the engagements which I have ventured to make on your side, I hope it will not be long before they are. All that is required of you is to assure that your daughter, by settlement, he equal share of £5,000 secured among your children after the decease of yourself and my sister, and moreover to enter into engagement of allowing her, during your life, £100 per annum per year. These are conditions which, considering everything, I had no hesitation in complying with, as far as I thought myself privileged for. I shall send this by express, that no time may be lost in bringing me your answer. You will easily comprehend from these particulars that Mr. Wickham's circumstances are not so hopeless as they generally believe to be. But he is blackmailing you into marrying your daughter. Blackmailing you so he can marry your daughter for money. The world has been deceived in that respect, and I am happy to say there will be some little money, even when all his debts are discharged, to settle on my niece, in addition to her own future. If, as I conclude will be the case, you send me full powers to act in your name throughout the whole of this business, I will immediately give directions to Haggerston for preparing a proper settlement. Though I'm sure Haggerston is like a lawyer. There will not be the smallest occasion for you coming to town again. Therefore, stay quiet at Longbourn and depend on my diligence and care. Send back your answer as fast as you can, and be careful to write explicitly. We have judged it best that my niece should be married from this house, of which I hope you will approve. She comes to us today. I shall write again as soon as anything is more determined on. Yours, etc., E.D.W. Gardner. Edward Gardner. Is it possible, cried Elizabeth when she had finished. Can it be possible that he will marry her? Wickham is not so undeserving, then, as we thought him, said her sister. My dear father, I congratulate you. And you have answered the letter? Cried Elizabeth. No, but it must be done soon. Most earnestly did she then entreat him to lose no more time before he wrote. Oh, my dear father, she cried, come back and write immediately. Consider how important every moment is in such a case. Let me write it for you, said Jane, if you dislike the trouble yourself. I dislike it very much, he replied, but it must be done. And so saying, he turned back with them and walked toward the house. And may I ask, said Elizabeth, but the terms, I suppose, must be complied with. Complied with? I am only ashamed of his asking so little. And they must marry, yet he said, such a man, yet he is such a man. Yes, they must marry. There is nothing else to be done. But there are two things that I want very much to know. One is how much money your uncle has laid down to bring it about, and the other, how am I ever to pay him? Money? My uncle? Cried Jane. What do you mean, sir? I mean that no man in his senses would marry Lydia on so slight a temptation as 100 a year during my life, and 50 after I am gone. That is very true, said Elizabeth, though it had not occurred to me before. His debts must be discharged, and something still to remain. Oh, it must be my uncle's doing. Generous good man, I am afraid that he has distressed himself. A small sum could not do all this. No, said her father, Wickham's a fool if he takes her with her farthing less than £10,000. I should be sorry to think so ill of him. In the very beginning of our relationship. £10,000, heaven forbid! How is half such a sum to be repaid? This is terrible. Mr. Bennet made no answer, and each of them, deep in thought, continued silent till they reached the house. Their father then went on to the library to write, and the girls walked into the breakfast room. And they are really to be married, cried Elizabeth, as soon as they were by themselves. How strange this is, and for this we are to be thankful, that they should marry, small as is their chance for happiness, and wretched as his character is, we are forced to rejoice. Oh, Lydia! I comfort myself in thinking, replied Jane, that he certainly would not marry Lydia if he had not a real regard for her. Though our kind uncle has done something towards clearing him, I cannot believe that £10,000 or anything like it has been advanced. He has children of his own and may have more. Really? How could he spare half £10,000? If he were ever able to learn what Wickham's debts have been, said Elizabeth, and how much is settled on the side of our sister, we shall exactly know what Mr. Gardiner has done for them, because Wickham has not sixpence of his own. The kindness of my uncle and aunt can never be requited. Requited? Requited. Their taking her home and affording her their personal protection and countenance is such a sacrifice to her advantage as years of gratitude cannot enough acknowledge. By this time she is actually with them. If such goodness does not make her miserable now, she will never deserve to be happy. What a meeting for her when she first sees my aunt. We must endeavour to forget all that has passed on either side, said Jane. I hope and trust that they will yet be happy. His consenting to marry her is a proof, I will believe, that he has come to a right way of thinking. Their mutual affections will steady them, and I flatter myself that they will settle so quietly and live in so rational a manner as may in time make their past imprudence forgotten. Their conduct has been such, replied Elizabeth, as neither you nor I nor anybody can ever forget. It is useless to talk of it. It now occurred to the girls that their mother was in all likelihood perfectly ignorant of what happened. They went to the library, therefore, and asked their father whether he would not wish them to make it known to her. He was writing, and without raising his head, coolly complied, "Just as you please." Just as you please. May we take my uncle's letter to read to her? Take whatever you like and get away. It's not funny. Elizabeth took the letter from his writing table, and they went upstairs together. Mary and Kitty were both with Mrs. Bennet. One communication would, therefore, do for all. Thank goodness we don't have to repeat this to everybody. Mrs. Bennet could hardly contain herself, and as soon as Jane had read Mr. Gardiner's hope of Lydia's being soon married, her joy burst forth. An ever-following sentence added to his exuberance. She was now in an irritation as violent from delight as she had ever been fidgety from alarm and vexation. To know that her daughter would be married was enough. She was disturbed by no fear for her felicity, nor humbled by any remembrance of her misconduct. My dear, dear Lydia, she cried, this is delightful indeed. She will be married. I shall see her again. She will be married at 16. My good, kind brother, I knew how it would be. I knew he would manage everything. How I long to see her and see dear Wickham too. But the clothes, the wedding clothes. I will write to my sister Gardiner about them directly. Lizzie, my dear, run down to your father and ask him how much he will give her. Stay, I will go myself. Ring the bell, Kitty, for Hill. I will put on my things in this moment. My dear, dear Lydia, how merry we shall be together when we meet. Her eldest daughter endeavoured to give some relief to the violence of these transports by leading her thoughts to the obligations which Mr. Gardiner's behaviour laid them all under. For we must attribute this happy conclusion, she added, in a great measure to his kindness. We are persuaded that he has pledged himself to assist Mr. Wickham with money. Well, cried her mother, it is all very right. Who should do it but her own uncle? If he had not had family of his own, and I and my children must have had all his money, you know. And it is the first time we've ever had anything from him except a few presents. Well, I'm so happy. In short a time I have a daughter married, Mrs. Wickham. How well it sounds. And she was only 16 last June. My dear Jane, I am such a flutter that I am sure I can't write, so I will dictate and you will write for me. We will settle with your father about money afterwards, but the things should be ordered immediately. Get that wedding dress. She was then proceeding to all the particulars of calico, muslin, and cambric, and would shortly have dictated some very plentiful orders, had not Jane, though with some difficulty, persuaded her to wait till her father had at leisure been consulted. One day's delay, she observed, would be of small importance, and her mother was too happy to be quite so obstinate as usual. Other schemes, too, came into her head. I will go to Meryton, said she, as soon as I am dressed, and tell the good news to my sister Phillips. And as I come back, I can tell on Lady Lucas and Mrs. Long. Kitty, run down and order the carriage. An airing would do me great deal of good, I am sure. Girls, can I do anything for you in Meryton? Oh, here comes Hill. My dear Hill, have you heard the good news? Miss Lydia is going to be married, and you shall have a bowl of punch to make merry at her wedding. And you shall all have a bowl of punch to make merry at her wedding. I wonder where they actually got married. Oh, at the church. I don't know. Mrs. Hill began instantly to express her joy. Elizabeth received her congratulations amongst the rest, and then, sick of this folly, took refuge in her own room, that she might think with freedom. Poor Lydia's situation must, at best, be bad enough, but that it was no worse, she had need to be thankful. She felt it so, and though in looking forward neither rational happiness nor worldly prosperity could be justly expected for her sister, in looking back to what they had feared, only 2 hours ago, she felt all the advantages of what they had gained. Ooh, chapter L. 50. Fun. It feels like a little accomplishment when you were like XXLLIVVI, and now you're like, ooh, chapter just L. Okay. Let's continue on. Chapter 50. Ooh, what a roller coaster, huh? That's quite a roller coaster, huh? Of emotions. I mean, she can just go from like laying in bed like my nerves and like needing to like undo her corset and stuff, and then being like, get everything ready, let's do this. Like, Mr. Bennet had very often wished before this period of his life that instead of spending his whole income, he had laid by an annual sum for the better provision of his children and of his wife, if she survived him. He now wished it more than ever. He had done his duty in that respect. Lydia need not have been indebted to her uncle for whatever of honour or credit could now be purchased for her. The satisfaction of prevailing on one of the most worthless young men in Great Britain to be her husband might then have rested in its proper place. He was seriously concerned that a cause of so little advantage to anyone should be forwarded at the sole expense of his brother-in-law, and he determined, if possible, to find out the extent of his assistance and to discharge the obligation as soon as he could. He's embarrassed that he can't pay for anything and wants to know how much his uncle put up. When first Mr. Bennet had married, economy was held to be perfectly useless, for, of course, they were going to have a son. The son was to join in cutting off the entail as soon as he should be of age, and the widow and younger children would by that means be provided for. 5 daughters successively entered the world, but yet the son was to come, and Mrs. Bennet, for many years after Lydia's birth, had been certain that he would. This event had at last been despaired of, but it was then too late to be saving. Mrs. Bennet had no turn for economy, and her husband's love of independence had only prevented their exceeding their income. He done did mismanage his money, and they just were banking on having a son. And they just didn't. £5,000 was settled by marriage articles on Mrs. Bennet and the children, but in what proportions it should be divided amongst the latter depended on the wills of the parents. This was one point with regard to Lydia at last, which was now to be settled, and Mr. Bennet could have no hesitation in acceding to the proposal before him. In terms of grateful acknowledgment for the kindness of his brother, though expressed most concisely, he then delivered on paper his perfect approbation of all that was done, and his willingness to fulfill the engagements that had been made for him. He had never before supposed that, could Wickham be prevailed on to marry his daughter, it would be done with so little convenience to himself as by the present arrangement. He would scarcely be £10 a year. £10? He would scarcely be £10 a year. The loser by the 100 that was to be paid them. Like, he was only going to have £10 afterwards, after they paid him the £100 a year? What with her board and pocket allowance, and the continual presents in money which passed to her through her mother's hands, Lydia's expenses had been very little within that sum. He scarcely had been £10 a year the loser by the 100 that was to be paid them. Okay. That it would be done with such trifling exertion on his side too was another very welcome surprise, for his wish at present was to have as little trouble in the business as possible. When the first transports of rage which had produced his activity in seeking her were over, he naturally returned to all his former indolence. His letter was soon dispatched, thank goodness, for although dilatory in undertaking business, he was quick in its execution. He begged to know further particulars of what he was indebted to his brother, but was too angry with Lydia to send any message to her. Okay, I just want to look that up real quick because I just can't stop looking at what the heck does it really mean that he's going to only have £10? He would scarcely, you can do this, scarcely be £10 a year the loser. Pride and Prejudice, we'll just do that. What's it mean? He would not lose. He would not lose much money because Lydia's expenses have been low. This settlement is easy for him to arrange. He doesn't provide for his daughters financially, which exposes them to the marriage market. Mr. Bennet's irresponsibility as a father. $17 million is £10,000 a year. Wow. Hold on. I'm a short while in Pride and Prejudice and understanding in marriage and blah, blah, blah. Really, with £5,000 was settled. Chapter 50. If I understand the section correctly, and to be honest, I'm not sure that I do. Reddit. Thank you, Reddit. I don't think that he's saying he'll continue paying her pocket allowance. I think this is making a comparison between what he has to pay for Lydia once she's married and what he has to pay when she's living at home. Once she got married, I think is what this tried. He had to give Wickham a portion of the £5,000 that Mrs. Bennet brought with her into the marriage. How much isn't clear to me. He also has to pay Wickham £100 per year on top of that. I think this is probably for as long as he lives. He's comparing this to what he paid for her while she was still unmarried at home, which included pocket allowance and any money that Mrs. Bennet managed to wangle out of him, which she then spent on Lydia. Okay. As Lydia is her mother's favorite child, that was probably quite a lot. So she believed that it's only going to cost him about £10 a year than what it would have if she never married Wickham in the first place. Okay, that makes sense. The good news was spreading quickly through the house, and with proportionate speed through the neighborhood. It was borne in the latter with decent philosophy. That's nice. To be sure, it would have been more for the advantage of conversation had Miss Lydia Bennet come upon the town, or the happiest alternative been secluded from the world in some distant farmhouse. But there was much to be talked of in marrying her, and the good-natured wishes for her well-doing which had proceeded before all the spiteful old ladies in Meryton lost but a little of their spirit in this change of circumstances, because with such a husband her misery was considered certain. He's not a good man. Okay. It was a fortnight since Mrs. Bennet had been downstairs. Oh my God. She was just in her room for 12 days. 14 days. It was a fortnight since Mrs. Bennet had been downstairs, but on this happy day she again took a seat at the head of her table, and in spirits oppressively high, no sentiment of shame gave a damp to her triumph. She said, I don't give a I don't give a shit how it happened. My daughter's getting married. End of story. We don't care about any of the other things. I don't care. My daughter is getting married. Okay. The marriage of a daughter, which had been the first object of her wishes since Jane was 16, was now on the point of accomplishment. And her thoughts and her words ran wholly on those attendants of elegant nuptials, fine muslins, new carriages, and servants. Wow. She's stoked. She was busy searching through the neighborhood for a proper situation for her daughter, and without knowing or considering what their income might be, rejected many as deficient in size and importance. Pride. It's one of the 7 deadly sins. Hay Park might do, said she, if the Goldings could quit it, or the great house at Stoke, if the drawing-room were larger, but Ashworth is too far off. I could not bear to have it 10 miles from me, and as for Pulvis Lodge, the attics are dreadful. Wow. I don't remember this part. It's almost like I didn't read this part. Okay. Her husband allowed her to talk on without interruption, while the servants remained. But when they had withdrawn, he said to her, Mrs. Bennet, before you take any or all of these houses from your son and daughter, let us come to a right understanding. Into one house in this neighborhood they shall never have admittance. I will not encourage the impudence of either by receiving them at Longbourn. Oh. A long dispute followed this declaration, but Mr. Bennet was firm. It soon led to another, and Mrs. Bennet found, with amazement and horror, that her husband would not advance a guinea to buy clothes for his daughter. How much was a guinea? Because I just think of guinea pigs. How much was a guinea worth? And 8 will do 1800. 21 shillings, or 1.05 in decimal. 30 shillings. Is a shilling is like a penny? American money. Converting a shilling to US dollars. 100 shillings is 5 cents. Whoa. 1/20th of a pound. 12 pence. 12 pence on the richer. Oh. That doesn't sound like a lot. 1 shilling be worth 5 pence. What is 5 pence in American USD? Like, but not really. Can you just like, I don't actually want the conversion. 0.05 pounds sterling, which is about the same as a penny in US dollars. Pennies. He said, I'm not paying pennies. A guinea. Her husband would not advance a guinea to buy clothes for his daughter. He protested that she should receive from him no mark of affection whatever on the occasion. Great. Sounds like a fun time. I'm going to get my best dress on. Mrs. Bennet could hardly comprehend it. That his anger could be carried to such a point of inconceivable resentment as to refuse his daughter a privilege without which her marriage would scarcely seem valid, exceeded all that she could believe possible. She was more alive to the disgrace which her want of new clothes must reflect on her daughter's nuptials than to any sense of shame at her eloping and living with Wickham a fortnight before they took place. I mean, good for her for just being like, you know what? What happened happened. I'm instantly stoked. We're having a wedding. You're going to be there. I kind of, good for her. Elizabeth was now most heartily sorry that she had, from the distress of the moment, been led to make Mr. Darcy acquainted with their fears for his sister. For since her marriage would so shortly give the proper termination to the elopement, they might hope to conceal its unfavourable beginning from all those who were not immediately on the spot. She had no fear of its spreading farther through his means. There were few people on whose secrecy she would have more confidently depended, but at the same time, there was no one whose knowledge of a sister's frailty would have mortified her so much, not, however, from any fear of disadvantage from it individually to herself, for at any rate there seemed a gulf of impassable between them. Had Lydia's marriage been concluded on the most honourable terms, it was not to be supposed that Mr. Darcy would connect himself with a family where, to every other objection, would now be added an alliance and a relationship of the nearest kind with a man whom he so justly scorned. From such a connection, she could not wonder that he would shrink. From such a connection, she could not wonder that he would shrink. The wish of procuring her regard, which she had assured herself of his feeling in Derbyshire, could not in rational expectation survive such a blow as this. She was humbled, she was grieved, she repented, though she hardly knew of what. She became jealous of his esteem. Oh, right. When she could no longer hope to be benefited by it. She wanted to hear of him when there seemed the least chance of gaining intelligence. She was convinced that she could have been happy with him when it was no longer likely they should meet. I'm feeling emotional today. This is all giving me deep emotions. Wow. What a triumph for him, as she often thought, What a triumph for him, as she often thought, could he know that the proposals which she had proudly spurned only 4 months ago would now have been the most gladly and gratefully received. He was as generous, she doubted not, as the most generous of his sex, but while he was mortal, there must be a triumph. She began now to comprehend that he was exactly the man who, in disposition and talents, would most suit her. Yeah, they have all these tete-a-tetes all the time, and they, challenge each other, and it does seem sweet. His understanding and temper, though unlike her own, would have answered all her wishes. It was a union that must have been to the advantage of both. By her ease and liveliness, his mind might have been softened, his manners improved. When you think you can just, be yourself and, another person is benefiting from that. And from his judgment, information, and knowledge of the world, she must have received benefit of greater importance. But no such happy marriage could now teach the admiring multitude of connubial felicity what connubial felicity really was. Connubial doesn't sound like a real word. Connubial means relating to marriage on the relationship. Oh, it's like conjugal. Connubial. Relating to marriage or the relationship of a married couple. Conjugal. Connubial bed. Wow. Connubial, dude. Yeah, it sounds very surfer. No, I don't know. It's just connubial. Okay. A connubial cloud. A connubial wave. Okay. Connubial felicity really was. Okay. An union. Interesting. An union of a different tendency and precluding the possibility of the other was soon to be formed in their family. How Wickham and Lydia were to be supported in tolerable independence she could not imagine. But how little of permanent happiness could belong to a couple who were only brought together because their passions were stronger than their virtue, she could easily conjecture. Okay, I should have seen that they did have sex before. weeks before this. Maybe I already thought it, but then, like, out loud, it's different. Mr. Gardner soon wrote again to his brother. To Mr. Bennet's acknowledgments he briefly replied, with assurance of his eagerness to promote the welfare of any of his family. That's sweet. Thank God for Mr. Gardner. And concluded with entreaties that the subject might never be mentioned to him again. He said, don't speak of it ever again. I'm happy to do it. And I would do it for any other family member. God bless people like that. The principal purport of his letter was to inform them that Mr. Wickham had resolved on quitting the militia. The letter says, it was greatly my wish that he should do so, he added, as soon as this marriage was fixed on, and I think you will agree with me in considering the removal from that cause as highly advisable, both on his account and my niece's. It is Mr. Wickham's intention to go into the regulars, and among his former friends there are still some who are able and willing to assist him in the army. He has the promise of an ensigncy in general. Blank's regiment. I just need to know how to say it, because it's a weird word that I don't think anybody's ever used before in my entire life.
Ensigncy.
An ensign. Oh, ensign. I've been saying ensign this whole time. It's ensign. Wow, ensign is spelled like that. Commissioned infantry officer in the British Army. Ensign. Duh. Ensigncy. In General Blank's regiment. Now quartered in the north. It is an advantage to have it so far from this part of the kingdom. He promises fairly, and I hope among different people, where they may each have a character to preserve, they will both be more prudent. I have written to Colonel Foster to inform him our present arrangements, and to request that he will satisfy the various creditors of Mr. Wickham in and near Brighton, with assurances of speedy payment, for which I have pledged myself, and I will give you yourself the trouble of carrying similar assurances to his creditors in Meryton, of whom I shall subjoin a list according to this information. Of whom shall I subjoin a list according to this information? He has given in all his debts. I hope at least he has not deceived us. Haggerston has our directions, and all will be completed in a week. They will then join his regiment, unless they are first invited to Longbourn. Oh. And I understand from Mrs. Gardner that my niece is very desirous of seeing you all before she leaves the south. She is well, and begs to be dutifully remembered to you and your mother. You and your mother. Yours, etc., E. Gardner. Wow. Mr. Bennet and his daughters saw all the advantages of Wickham's removal from Lancashire as clearly as Mr. Gardner could do. But Mrs. Bennet was not so well pleased with it, Lydia's being settled in the north, just when she had expected most pleasure and pride in a company, for she had by no means given up on her plan of their residing in Hertfordshire. Was a severe disappointment, and besides it was such a pity that Lydia should be taken from a regiment where she was acquainted with everybody and had so many favourites. This mom is like, let her stay there. She loves literally all of the men, and they all love her, and it's so fun. Like, encouraging her to whore herself out. Okay. She is so fond of Mrs. Foster, said she. It will be quite shocking to send her away, and there are several of the young men, too, that she likes very much. The officers may not be so pleasant in General Blank's regiment. Girl. His daughter's request, for such it might be considered, of being admitted into a family again before she set off for the north, received at first an absolute negative. She cannot come back up here. She cannot stay in this house. But Jane Elizabeth, who agreed in wishing, for the sake of their sister's feelings and consequence, that she should be noticed on her marriage by her parents, urged him so earnestly, yet so rationally and so mildly, to receive her and her husband at Longbourn, as soon as they were married, that he was prevailed on to think that as they ought, think as they thought, and act as they wished. And their mother had the satisfaction of knowing that she would be able to show her married daughter to the neighborhood before she was banished to the north. When Mr. Bennet wrote again to his brother, therefore, he sent his permission for them to come, and it was settled that as soon as the ceremony was over, they should proceed to Longbourn. He does not want to see his daughter. Elizabeth was surprised, however, that Wickham should consent to such a scheme, because we all hate him, and he's, like, cool with it. Interesting. And had she consulted only her own inclination, any meeting with him would have been the last object of her wishes. Yeah, I bet. Golly, what an awkward thing. And I watched this video by that girl Ellie that's learned me so much, taught me so much, that, like, your brother-in-law is like your brother. And if your sister dies, like, and you're the only sister or whatever, you're supposed to, like, go there and, like, take care of the kids and, like, take care of him, like, as a sister. And then sometimes those people would fall in love, and it was like, you're basically, like, marrying your brother, and it was, like, incesty, but some people would do it because, wow. So interesting. Coming up, chapter 51, 10 more chapters left. We're not trying to super go fast, but we are excited to finish and excited to keep on reading. And I will read Sense and Sensibility next. And I hope everybody has a lovely time reading whatever you're reading. Happy reading to everyone who's reading anything. I'm currently reading a book that was recommended by Brittany Broski, who I love watching. And it's called Half a Soul, and it's just like Regency era fairy stuff, and it's very fun. Thanks, Brittany Broski, for being such a good commentating on what you're reading. I'm not good at that. She doesn't read like I do, obviously. She just has a podcast, and it's like really good, and she has really good opinions about things, and it's fun to watch. All right, everybody, happy reading. Ta-ta.